Hi everyone, welcome to this quick Legislative 101 webinar. Whether you've been on a million Hill visits or preparing for your first one, it's helpful to hear what you're heading into. So let's get started. Here we can see some of the basic facts about the federal government. There are 435 representatives in the House of Representatives and 100 senators in the Senate. Together, the House and Senate make up Congress. Everyone has one representative who represents their specific district and two senators who represent their state. And then there's us, the constituents.
In this short presentation, you'll learn more about the 4 P's of winning advocacy. Those things are know the players, 1, 2, know the process, 3, know the policy, and 4, know the politics. So the first P is knowing the players and meeting with the legislator or staffer in person. As you come to Washington, D.C., meeting with your member of Congress or their staff and developing a close personal relationship with them are some of the most effective ways to influence your legislators' positions on an issue. And one of the most important things to know is that congressional staff are almost all new, especially when you're talking about those folks that are in the lower policy positions within a congressional office. So as you can see from this chart here from the Congressional Management Foundation, which tracks this kind of data, 70% of staffers have been in their position from 0 to up to 2 years, and you can see how the chart moves from there. So when you're going into a meeting, it's important to think about how the person you might be speaking with will be hearing about arthritis and all of our important priorities for the very first time. Thinking about the chart on the last slide, if we now turn to a typical congressional office structure, you can see in red that legislative assistants are highlighted. These individuals are usually new to their positions per that last slide, but they are the ones that you would interact with most frequently on issues of policy. So that's health policy, transportation issues, funding and appropriations policy, among many others. The key difference in legislative assistants between the House and the Senate is that in the House, legislative assistants can be considered more generalists. They're responsible for several different areas of policy at once, whereas in the Senate, LAs typically cover just 1 to 2 policy areas and are able to develop a much more specialized level of expertise on the issue. So this is something to keep in mind when you enter a congressional office and have an interaction.
Here's another look at your typical congressional office structure. Legislative assistants may appear to be pretty far down in the pecking order, but they're still subject matter experts who can directly pass your asks along and help set the congressional agenda. That's why we emphasize building relationships with your HLAs or health legislative assistants.
Knowing the process is the second P. So interacting with your legislator is a bit like a cross-country road trip. So I'm sure for many of you, the image here is very familiar for those of you that have kids. But the idea here is that the "Are we there yet?" question that I'm sure we've all asked at one time or another is illustrated by the fact that there's really no constitutional limit on the number of times you can ask your member of Congress to take action on your behalf. Keeping the drumbeat going and demonstrating your advocacy through continuous follow-up until you develop a strong relationship with the staffer in your congressional office is a really great way to make sure that they know who you are, know your issues, and can keep you in mind when the policy window opens to enact legislation that we care about.
So knowing the process for a legislative visit or an in-person meeting is more than just being persistent. So here's a list of a number of different do's and don'ts to keep in mind for your in-person meeting with your legislator or a staffer. And the first is to prepare for the visit. So right now, by watching this video, you are preparing for your visit. You're already off to a great start for learning how to be as prepared as possible for the visit. The next one here is to make sure you are punctual and positive. Staff meet with advocates and constituents just like you every single day, often from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or more. So be mindful of their time. Be sure to get there on time or even early if you're able to. And check in, take your time, get yourself composed, and get ready for your meeting. Also, keeping up a positive attitude throughout the day can really go a long way, especially with so many meetings happening. The next one is to customize your pitch. Be sure to share your story, share why the specific ask that you are talking about, share about how it affects you, how it affects your friends and family or other people with arthritis. Make it as memorable as possible in that way, and be sure to focus in on that one ask that you are talking about that day. Another do is to listen to the different stories or anecdotes or things that the person you're meeting with, a legislator or a staffer, is talking about. These are great things to take notes on while you're in the meeting if you're able to, and gather information to use in a follow-up or something to keep in mind for the future to make you stand out just a little bit more. But listening and hearing about what they are particularly interested in or their experiences and things like that is very important. One of the biggest do's is to say thank you. Say thank you when you're in person, send a follow-up email or handwritten letter that says thank you for taking the time to speak with me about this important issue. That's another great opportunity, of course, to reiterate your ask and let them know that this is something that you really care about. Always also ask for a business card of whoever you are meeting with so that you can follow up afterwards and you can make sure that your message gets across. You can either follow up and say, hey, I'm still interested about this, or thank them for taking action on that specific ask if they did. And then similar to that, always follow up. Remind them of what you've been talking about, remind them your story, and remind them that you will be back and you look forward to talking with them again. So while there are many things to do as far as process goes for an in-person meeting, there are just a couple things that we recommend you do not do. And so the first one here is to not assume that the legislator or staffer or whomever you're meeting with is familiar with the issue that you're talking about. Even though they may be a health legislative assistant or something like that, there are hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe even more different issues that fall within any specific category. So it's important that you provide all of the context possible when you are going in and talking with a legislator or staffer. This makes sure that they know that you know what you're talking about, and you can be sure that they really truly have all of the information that they need. This is a great time to leave your leave behind materials with them, if you have any, and follow up also. Another don't is to confuse the situation by talking about multiple different issues. It's recommended that you stick to one topic so that you don't confuse the meeting at all. Sticking to one topic makes it where you can talk at a little bit more length about that one subject. You can make sure that whoever you're meeting with really understands the topic and knows how they can take action, what steps they need to take, and what they can pass on to the member if they are a staffer. Another don't, and this is an important one, is don't feel like you need to answer questions that you don't know the answer to. It is totally okay to say, I don't know. It's totally okay to say, I'm not sure, but let me look it up or ask the Arthritis Foundation staff and I'll get back to you. This is also a really great way to incorporate your follow-up. If there was a question of clarification that you needed to look up or ask someone about later, it's a great opportunity to follow up and say, hello, so-and-so. We met earlier this week and I have an answer to your question. I also wanted to reiterate, and here are some of the materials that we've been talking about. So it is completely okay to say, I don't know, let me get back to you, and don't be afraid to do that. Another important part of understanding the process of speaking with your legislators and their staff is understanding exactly what all of the steps are that a bill can go through to become a law. Every time you go meet with your legislator about a specific topic, whether it be step therapy or prior authorization or surprise billing or anything in between, the bill will be sitting at a different place in this cycle. So feel free to pause the video and take a look at the different steps and text here to get a better understanding. But in essence, a bill starts out it is drafted. And a bill is drafted because a member of Congress knows that it is an issue that affects their constituents, their citizens in the region that they represent. And so we can go and share our stories before a bill is even introduced. We can talk about any number of topics and encourage our member of Congress to work with other members of Congress, to draft legislation on a specific topic. Once it is drafted, it is introduced, it is given a name and a bill number in the Senate or the House, and then it is sent through a number of different steps. It's reported and debated. It's talked back and forth about the pros and cons of the legislation, if there is a different way to write it, if there's a different way if it's a program being implemented, if there's a different way that can be put into place. The bill is talked about backwards and forwards and upside down and all of that. The bill will be sent through a few more steps before it is sent to a vote, and the bill will pass if it receives a majority of votes, which is 218 out of 435 in the House of Representatives and 51 out of 100 in the U.S. Senate. And that is for the federal level, so the numbers can look a little bit different on the state side. After that, the bill will go through a couple more steps, and if all is well, it will land on the president's desk for a signature. And so you've likely seen some photos of different presidents signing bills into law, some of the more historic ones and things like that. So that is a very, very exciting moment when that happens. So again, feel free to pause the video on this slide and look over this, but it's important to keep in mind that when you are going and talking about any sort of legislative ask or issue, that the bill that it corresponds to can be at a number of different steps, and that can really inform the way that we are creating the ask and putting together our talking points and leave behind materials. So for sure, check this out.
So the third P is knowing the policy and understanding how to stay focused and asking for concrete specific action. So under that do column on the last slide, you'll remember that we talked about keeping the meeting focused. And part of the way you can do that is following these 4 steps here on this slide, the first being highlighting the problem. Consider using 1 or 2 statistics that you find most compelling about an issue and starting with those. Using those statistics to identify a solution to that problem and describing how the legislation or issue will contribute to making, again, the problem go away. And then third is sharing your story and making it real and bringing your experiences into the conversation. And last but not least is the buildup of those last 3 steps are towards the request, what it is that you want the legislator to do. So the final P is knowing the politics and making sure that you keep in the back of your mind the awareness of the political environment, because that will really shape your approach to the meeting. So as you can see here, we have a breakdown of the 116th Congress, which took their seats in January of this year. And you can see on the House side, the Democrats took control of the House. And on the Senate side, the Republicans were able to retain a majority. So a key quote that we pulled from the Congressional Management Foundation survey of staff is this, quote, "One of the biggest mistakes is not customizing the pitch to our office. We're a conservative Republican office, so the argument should be adjusted to appeal to that philosophical view." The same would be true if you were going into a liberal Democrat office, is thinking about how the issue might resonate a bit more with that staffer or that legislator to really be persuasive and advocate for your position. So there you have it. Those are the 4 Ps of Legislative 101, and we wanted to leave you with this slide with the following quote: "Nobody can do it alone. Having consumers, parents, and other advocates working together with a key legislator or 2 is the only way to pass a bill. Legislators help with the process, and the stakeholders provide the passion." So with that, we have concluded our Legislative 101.